Today I have invited Dr. Christopher Longhurst to a Zoom recording for a broadcast. Dr. Christopher Longhurst is a New Zealander who has spent many years abroad. He returned to Aotearoa, New Zealand after his academic studies in theology and gaining work experience in Europe and Northern Africa. In Rome, Italy, he was operatore didattico, an educational instructor for the scientific and administrative management of the Vatican museums. And in Ifrane, in Morocco, he served as assistant professor of philosophy and religious studies at Al Akwan University. Back in New Zealand, he is a lecturer at Te Kupenga Theological College of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and actively involved in interreligious dialogue and interfaith work. A few months ago, Chris graduated from the King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, CAICID, Fellows Program in Lisbon, in Portugal. Chris, as I mentioned earlier, you've been working for the Vatican museums. One of the most famous pieces of art there is the Pieta by Michelangelo. What do we know about the creation of this masterpiece?
Indeed, thanks, Pieta. It was originally commissioned by a French cardinal who was the papal ambassador, the French ambassador to Rome. And Rome at the time was the capital of the papal state. So it was commissioned by the cardinal for the French chapel in the old St. Peter's Basilica, the basilica built by Constantine in the 4th century for the cardinal's funeral piece. So it would have been an extraordinary work of art, unprecedented in its time in Rome, being a high Renaissance work of a Florentine sculptor in what was essentially an old medieval basilica for St. Peter's. So the Pope at the time was Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI. So the French cardinal was commissioning it to a Florentine sculptor again for a piece in Rome. So it was a very important work for Michelangelo because he was young at the time when he got the commission. He was only 23 in 1498. He was now coming to Rome, to a city that he would not have been well known in, do a work of art for a French ambassador.
How did they find Michelangelo? At the age of 23, who knew about him?
Well, again, in Rome, no one would have known a lot about him, and he wouldn't have been that popular in Rome, but certainly up in Florence already. He would have been well known, working in the Medici court since an early age, around 13, and also at the Florentine Academy. He would have been well known. The important thing about this work of art, too, is it was the catalyst that brought him back to Rome to work for the papal tomb. A few years later, in 1505, Michelangelo came back to Rome after Pope Julius II, who was now Pope, commissioned Michelangelo, having seen Pieta, to work on his own tomb. So in a sense, it was the cause of Michelangelo's career as a young artist, taking off in Rome, now being commissioned by the Pope. But this particular work of art was commissioned by a French diplomat, a cardinal, who would have been probably more associated with the state of Florence through his cultural diplomacy rather than with the papal state of Rome at the time too. So there's this politics behind its creation as well.
And why was it a Pieta? Did they say we want to have an artist from Florence who will make a sculpture of the Pieta, or was it something we want to have a special piece of art and Michelangelo could choose?
Well, that would have been the cardinal's prerogative to decide what the subject matter was for his funeral monument, though this is unprecedented in the sense that even though it would be fitting, one would presume to have the topic of Pieta, meaning sorrow, and especially the sorrow of a mother holding the dead body of her son, who is believed to be the Son of God. And Mary to be the mother of God. So a highly spiritual work of art too, but quite fitting for a funeral monument insofar as Pieta means the sorrow. Sometimes people translate Pieta as pity, as mercy, but really it means, regarding the etymology of the term, it means sorrow. The difference here, however, is that Michelangelo is bringing now a theme from Northern Europe, from Germany and from Belgium, where the Pieta was very common. He's bringing it for the first time into Italian culture. So the Pieta wouldn't have been popular at the time that Michelangelo introduces it into Roman society. And we see how he's changed it too, because many of the Pietas from the Northern European, German, Belgium tradition were far more sorrowful, because when you look at the emotion in the mother, she's hardly wailing at the foot of the cross, which is often how the Pieta is depicted, with Mary with such anguish and sorrow in the face. One could argue that Michelangelo's Pieta doesn't even have emotion in the face of the mother. She's at least quite resigned, quite peaceful in a sense. So this was quite new. This was a new style of the Pieta, and we're certainly not looking at a Jewish mother. We're looking at a high Renaissance Roman matron, a very strong woman that Michelangelo has used to depict the scene as well.
Chris, you mentioned that the cardinal would have given his ideas to Michelangelo regarding the artwork. How much is known about this? Is there any paperwork, or is there anything that is known of what he told Michelangelo?
There's the standard of the time, there's the rules of the time, where the person who's in charge is indeed the patron who commissions the work of art. With Michelangelo, it's a little complex, but we do have, from art historical perspectives, we do have the contracts. But the contracts are very simple. The contracts are more legal documents that tell you, who is commissioning it, who the artist is, when it's being commissioned, over what period of time the work is to be completed. The most important thing historically is the contract and the patron, and not the artist. Remember, the artist can't sign their works. The works don't belong to the artist. It's not about the artist. It's about the patron at the time. To answer your question, apart from the theme and in the conversation that would take place between Michelangelo and his patron, the contract's quite simple, really.
I think it's always important to understand that it was not an artist who decided, I want to do this and that, or he had to get the order from somebody who commissioned him, had some specific ideas in mind.
Sure. Well, the idea would be, of course, the theme, the subject matter, but the content, what's actually in the work, to separate it from the subject matter, is what makes the work of art from an aesthetic and semiotic point of view quite different. And we can talk about that with this work. But mind you, despite what I just said, this is one work that Michelangelo did in fact sign right across the belt that runs across the breast of the mother. Michelangelo does have a signature on there in a beautiful Latin script saying that Michelangelo Buonarroti, the Florentine, made this, but that wasn't part of the commission either, and he shouldn't have done that. He did that after it was completed, probably against his patron's will or knowledge, even, apparently, according to the history. And there's a reason why he did that. He's young, he's ambitious, and he's not known in Rome, and he's not getting the credit that he thought he deserved. Remember, Michelangelo is a sculptor, and this is a monumental, monolithic piece of marble that he has carved to create not just a work of art that we're supposed to look at, but he's wanting to invite us in to participate in the event that's taking place here. And we can talk about that too, because it's not, even though she's sitting on a rock, this is certainly not a static work of art. This is a highly dynamic spiritual work of art. A work of art that we're supposed to walk around and see and participate in what's going on here.
I was just wondering, maybe because we are also for the people who are on the radio, we will put a picture on the Pieta on the website, because it's quite a special Pieta. But however, I always find it most fascinating to hear someone describing a piece of art that is then somehow created anew in your mind. So how would you, as you have seen the Pieta in reality, how would you describe Michelangelo's Pieta?
Sure. The mother is sitting on a rock, and she's not holding on to the body, despite what it seems. There's movement and there's emotion. The left hand is not touching the body. It's open. is showing a gesture toward the audience, toward the observer, and the right hand is propping the body up. And if we could look down on this, even though we're on an image, you're kind of looking at it from a frontal view. If you look down on it, you'll see the three-dimensionality of the artwork, the full visibility of it. Christ's naked body is it's in a serpentine form. It's like an S laid over her lap. So the body is very soft. The flesh is soft. The right hand of Mary is propping him up, almost for us to see, but she's not holding on to the body. If you follow the movement through in your mind, she's letting him go. She's physically letting him go. The muscles are drawn back in a sense that the body is coming forward. She's literally giving up the body to the observer. And this is very important. And this is typical of Michelangelo, how he invites the audience in, he invites the observer in. She is literally giving us the physical body of Christ. It's like a mother letting go of her baby, but in this case, her child. She's letting him go. The body is being given to the audience, but at the same time, I mentioned before that she's a Roman matron, a strong, relatively young woman with massive folds of cloth. If you look at her dress, and you can feel that light dark contrast caused by how the marble has been extracted, to see that depth of cloth between her legs. So her legs are open. And Christ is on her lap, but all the folds of that material and the cloth down the side of Mary over onto her shoulder become the cloth of the shroud that encloses the body back into the tomb. So this is this double movement that Michelangelo has in all of his sculptures. She on one level she's physically letting go of the body, but on another level she's spiritually receiving back the body, as if her womb becomes the tomb where the body is being enclosed into the womb of the mother again. So Michelangelo has this double movement of letting go and receiving back. So the womb becomes the tomb. So it's a highly sacramental work of art for Michelangelo too. It's directing us to his belief of the presence of God, where in the Christian tradition the audience is receiving the body of Christ.
At the time of Michelangelo, there were a lot of different Pieta in artwork. How do you think that he came to the idea of doing it completely different, or not to show the grieving mother, but as you said, just a very strong Roman matron?
Indeed, and young too. Some say it's the idealization of his own mother that he didn't know. It's a very personal work of art for Michelangelo. We know this. He talked about it later in his life. Remember, he completes this at the age of around 23, 24. He lived to be 89. So there is, in the art history records, talk about him referring back throughout his life to this work of art as if it were the most important piece for him. The concept, the Oedian, Freud's Oedian complex regarding perhaps his relationship with his mother, so the idealization of Michelangelo's own mother. So it's both an intimate work for him, and it's certainly an intimate work for anyone who looks at it. So again, that's Michelangelo in a sense. We know that he has a lot of his own personality, a lot of his own angst, and his own faith. He's a man of a very deep faith, but also a man in conflict with church authority, and we know this throughout his history. Therefore, he is. It becomes interesting to think about how much of this is conforming to whatever instruction he was given, and how much of it is his own insights, his own work. She's sitting on a rock. She's sitting on a rock. And the church, the tradition of the Catholic Church has always placed that symbolism of the rock being Peter, where St. Matthew's Gospel says, "On this rock I will build my church," and that's always attributed to Peter being the rock on which the church is built. But Michelangelo clearly has Mary on the rock, therefore she is super hunc Petram edificabit ecclesiam meum. She's on this rock on which the church is built. So Michelangelo is the church, Mother Church, for us too. But again, going back to that idea of emotion and youngness, she's simultaneously a very strong woman, and very young and refined and supple. And there's a conversation that Michelangelo had with one of his pupils that's been recorded about the historical inaccuracy of her being too young to be the mother of the man she's holding. But that's typical of Renaissance works of art and also Michelangelo's works as well, because it's not supposed to be historically accurate. Again, Michelangelo is showing that this is that moment when Mary conceives Jesus and is told of the fate of her son. But the fate is that the son does not die and remain dead. But as Luke said, she ponders all these things in her heart, that her son suffers death on the cross, but is resurrected and glorified. And so, this is Mary. For me, this is young Mary, the 13, 14-year-old virgin mother, Jewish mother, who has just been given the announcement from the Archangel Gabriel that she will conceive. And now she's almost in a metaphysical way holding the dead body in her mind and in her arms now. But she's not sad because she knows that her son will be glorified. Her son is the incarnation of God. So I think Michelangelo is playing into that idea that Luke tells us in the Gospels, that she ponders all these things in her heart, because indeed the eyes are cast down, but there is this beautiful, soft, almost subtle. There's no strain, there's no stress, there's no sorrow whatsoever in the face.
It's a little bit like do unto me as you wish. She gives herself to God.
Indeed, and the hand symbolizes that too. The letting go, the resignment to the will of God, an extraordinary gesture in that hand there. Do unto, let it fiat voluntas tua, thy will be done. And again, look at the hand though. That despite the symbolism of the letting go and the softness, it's a very strong hand. Let's be objective. It's a masculine hand. But again, the broad shoulders. Michelangelo is again playing into the idea of strength, moral strength, the strength of a mother to suffer herself the miniest death of her son. But look at the body of Christ. It's soft. It's almost sensuous. You can almost feel the blood having just stopped flowing through the veins there in the forearm, and the limpness of the flesh where Mary is holding it up. The intercostal and muscles there, and the abdominal muscles there. It's a very beautiful work of art too, from a physiological point of view as well. The limpness of the head of Christ lying back, the throat, the neck fully exposed.
Chris, you have seen the monument many times, and you've walked around it. How is Jesus's face? Because usually we always see the perspective of Mary's face, but as you just said, Jesus's head is tilted back, and we can only see his throat, but we can't see his face. So how does his face look like?
And it's absolutely extraordinary, because it's simultaneously idealized and natural. Michelangelo has the skin drawn back by the weight of the flesh moving over the bones. So you can almost feel the weight of the skin, which recalls the idea of a person who has died. That sense of dead weight, where the muscles are hanging in the skin. The skin is pulled across the face. But again, it's both beautiful, idealized because of the canons of Renaissance style that Michelangelo is conforming to. Very idealized work of art, but also it's a classical work of art because it's naturalized. You're looking at natural beauty in an idealized form, and this is different from Michelangelo too. He has that capacity that makes him quite unique to simultaneously mix up categories, both aesthetic categories, spiritual categories. So you see that in the face too. Yeah,
it's really beautiful. And where is it placed? Is it placed in a big empty room, or where is the statue?
It's in the new St. Peter's Basilica, the basilica that he helped build actually as an architect. When you enter St. Peter's Basilica, there are many lateral chapels, side chapels. So the basilica is massive, but as soon as you go in the main door, if you look to your immediate right, you'll see at the first side chapel in the north. On the right, it's called the Chapel of the Pieta, and that's where it is today. So that's what you're looking at behind it is the marble, the sections of the veneer of a marble wall inside the chapel, and it's up on an altar. You can see where the image that I'm looking at, and that's on the screen now, is eye level on top of an altar. So on standing on the ground, you're looking up to it. And unfortunately, today it's difficult to walk around it, of course, because the viewers would stand in front behind a glass screen, actually.
Yeah.
So you don't get that. That's not what Michelangelo would have wanted. Again, as we know, conforming to the canons of full visibility, and typical with Michelangelo's work, it's an event. It's an event that he wants us to participate in.
Well, I think that so many people are visiting the place. If everybody was going around and touching maybe the sculpture that might have been in Michelangelo's idea, but it's maybe unpractical or dangerous today. Who knows? But how big is Mary? Is she life size?
She's larger than life.
Okay.
She is 2.5, 3 times the average size of a person, so it's quite large. And the sun may seem small, but again, note that the sun is draped over her legs, so it's certainly larger than life. You're looking at a massive work of art. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a one-piece. It's a one-piece Carrara marble stone, so it's a monolithic work of art too.
But I think that what we'll do is we'll organize a presentation where you can show the Pieta from the different angles and explain to our audience the details that they wouldn't know if you just see the picture of the statue. If you see, or even if you go to the Vatican Museum, as you say, you can't even walk around. So I think that will be very helpful when we see some details and we have some more pictures. And yes, it's a beautiful piece of art. And yeah, thank you so much, Chris.
You're welcome, Pieta. There's also a couple of resources online that you might be interested in, where you can the video resources where you can actually see the work of art as the camera moves around in full visibility.
Oh, we can put these links up on the website so that people can look at them. Thank you so much, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.